Hey guys, Ethan here from WordTech, back with another video, and this is actually my second time filming this because OBS decided, apparently when you add a new audio source or a video source that has an embedded audio source, it decides to just put it on every track. So I ended up garbling all of my audio because I adjusted a few things, and this microphone was mixed with the microphone from my camera on the same track, so there was no way to fix it. So anyway, here we are, take two. This video is basically going to be a video talking about Ubiquiti Unifi from a firewalling perspective and things that I would like to see them add or adjust to it to make it better from like an enterprise firewall standpoint. Now, they've come a long way, so this is going to be getting into a little bit more niche stuff. I'm actually pretty impressed with where Ubiquiti is now versus like 3 years ago, where I would have laughed if somebody wanted to put one in production, to be honest. Like their firewall specifically, switching and APs have been good for a while. APs have been pretty much excellent, actually. But their firewalls have come a long way over the last few years, and there's less to complain about than there used to be, but I still wanted to make a video covering features that I think should be added and that most other big firewall brands have, or at least some of them do. Now, a lot of this is comparison directly to pfSense and OPNsense and some of their features, so some of this is built upon that, but there are also a lot of other enterprise firewalls, like, I mean, please don't ever use it, but SonicWall or FortiGates that have features that I would like to see and have a lot of these features that I'm going to list here as well. So I wanted to make a video talking about it because Ubiquiti does seem to, even though they often don't directly respond to criticism, they seem to listen to criticism. So I figured it was worth making a video to talk about this and also seeing how other people feel about it. But first, a sip of coffee. Okay, so I've got my Unifi Dream Machine Pro opened up here, and this is, also another compliment that I'm going to get into before I start complaining is really that I can't believe a firewall this old at this price point is still getting the updates that it's getting. That is something that I really, really appreciate. They have completely changed the capabilities of this firewall from its original launch day. And that continued support is something that I really like to see, because you have people that are probably looking at something like the Dream Machine Beast right now, which is a $1,500 firewall. It's actually $1,600 if you include the memory surcharge right now. And you have to be confident that you're going to be able to get updates for a long time if you're going to drop that kind of cash on something like a firewall. So kudos to them. I like to see that this is just so different than it was originally. And when I first bought this, which was basically near launch day, I was really unhappy with the design of it, and now it's actually a very good firewall that I feel like is a very viable option for a lot of labbers, a lot of small businesses. If you're getting into networking, it's fantastic. A lot of things are just, they've come a long way, and this is impressive. But anyway, now into the things that I really feel like Unifi or Ubiquiti should be adding to the Unifi firewall ecosystem. So the first thing is I've got my aliases opened up here, and something that I would like to see is the ability to nest aliases. So these have come a long way, where if I open up one of these, you'll see Editor Ethan here. I did make a bit of a mistake with this, and it was kind of an oopsie, but since this is my second time, kind of third filming this, I don't think I'm going to redo it. So the points I make will still stand, but you won't be able to see what's behind me in the top right corner because I forgot to adjust my OBS settings to record my my video on a separate section, I usually record it as a separate piece. I double the width and stuff like that and record it as a separate piece so that I can overlay and move around the video of myself wherever I want. But because I did this as a layer on the same video, there's no way to recover what's behind it. So just bear with me. I think everything will still make sense in this video as we go forward, but that is the reason that you can't see behind there. Now you can see a little bit, so it might be enough to get the point across for anything that I do show the side panels for, but just putting that in here as a little bit of a mistake I made. That you can add domains now, and you can also do descriptions. Those were not there until the most recent big Unifi update, and that's been fantastic. I'm very glad to have that because I do oftentimes like to take notes about my aliases, and it's nice to come back and do that. And the description field can be pretty large on here, so this is just great. I love seeing that. But I would like to see the ability to nest aliases. So that would basically be the ability to add an alias to another alias. And the reason for that is it helps with organization when you're doing a lot of complex firewalling. And so say you have 5 different servers and you need different rules for each of those servers. So you create an alias for each of those, server 1, server 2, server 3, whatever, right? But then you also have a rule where all 5 of those servers need to do the same thing in your firewall. Well, in Ubiquiti's, in Unifi, you've got to create another alias and add those 5 servers' IP addresses to it. And the problem with that is either that or again create a bunch of rules based on the other individual aliases. And the problem with that is, say one of the IP addresses of the servers needs to change, then you have to go back and both change it in its individual alias and change it in the group alias that has all 5 servers in it. The ability to nest aliases means all you would have to do is go change the one singular alias that is associated with that, and it would go update to any of the other aliases that it's nested into. So that's something I'd like to see. It just makes complex environments a lot more easy to manage. So that's something I would really like to see added. I would also like to see the whole network lists feature be organized a little bit better. I feel like domains, IPs, and ports should be in different tabs and stuff, because at least from my perspective, when I firewall, I tend to have a lot of aliases. That's the way I like to do it, and I think a lot of people feel the same way. And being able to go in here and not just scroll through a giant list would be really nice, because it's kind of ridiculous how big the list is. Now, another thing that I think would be really nice is searchable aliases. Now, somebody's going to already be typing a comment that the aliases are searchable, but what I really mean is a search box that appears in the network list section here, rather than having to search all of settings. So if I search all of settings, I can search for image here, and you can see the port and server both come up from the network lists here. So that's great, but I personally would much prefer a little search box here, similar to what they have on the zone-based firewall rules tab, where you can search the rules there. Another thing here is, this is actually going to be kind of a big section about IPsec and some of the things that I would like to see. And some of this applies to VPNs in general, but I'm taking this from an IPsec perspective. So first, I would really like to see the ability to policy route IPsec out an IPsec tunnel from another VPN tunnel. So whether that's WireGuard or that is specific to like another site-to-site VPN, you're not really able to do that. So just to give you an example of what I mean here, I've got a new policy-based route created, right? Like I'm working on creating one, and you can select, as it says, VPN tunnel or interface. So if I had an IPsec site-to-site, which I don't in this environment right now, but if I did, I could select it here. So like, yes, you can policy route out an IPsec tunnel, which is great, but as the source, you cannot select a VPN network. So if I scroll through here, my WireGuard network does not appear in here, and I really would like to see that. There are a lot of reasons you might want to do that. Like, say you're routing all of your stuff across the site-to-site tunnel, you might want clients that are VPN clients to be able to route through that too, and there's just not the ability to do that. So I would like to see that. This has been asked about for a long time. In fact, I have a forum post about it from many years ago, so I'm not sure if this is something that's really complicated from Ubiquity's perspective to do based on, the internal workings of how the Unifi firewalls are set up. So maybe this is a big challenge, and admittedly, it's a more niche feature, but I would still like to see it. I think it would be a fantastic thing to see. So another thing that I would like to see changed is the ability to host a IPsec VPN on an internal IP address. So I don't know why they have it set up this way, but basically you can't bind it to an internal interface. So there isn't a way to set up a site-to-site tunnel in a lab environment behind the firewall. And that's something that I like to do for like testing, VPN performance testing. There's lots of reasons you might want to do that, but you can only bind IPsec VPNs to the WAN interfaces, the various WAN interfaces. And even if you enter the IP address manually here, this is just for showing you or giving you the ability to select other IP addresses on a WAN interface. It doesn't change where the IPsec binds to. So you can't, even if you change this to an internal IP address at the firewall, you are not able to build a site-to-site tunnel internally. And I would like to see that, because again, it's great for performance testing especially, and that could be on Ubiquity's gear or it could be on other firewall gear, but it's nice for performance testing to do an internal site-to-site, because not everybody has a fast enough WAN connection to push firewalls all the way. And so being able to build that internally and do testing is something I'd like to see. There are other reasons that you might want to do this, so it's a feature I'd like to see added. That's admittedly a little selfish just because I would like to use it, but this is something that pfSense and OPNsense both support really, really well. Now, another IPsec thing that I want to mention, and this is specific to IPsec as well, whereas some of the other stuff was, more about just VPNs in general, but I would like to see IPsec tunnel settings here have a little bit more granularity with a few more options. Now, the big thing for me is, and maybe they can't do this with their silicon, there's been some debate on the forums about that, and I don't know quite enough about the chips that they're using to know, but I would like to see GCM, Gallius Counter Mode, available for AES here, and that's specifically because of the speed improvements that you'll see with that versus your standard CBC cipher block chaining method, which is what Ubiquity uses here for IPsec. It's not really a security difference. I mean, there's conversations to be had about that, but that's not the point of this video. I would just like to see that available in here. And again, it's just for the performance increase. So if they have another way of doing bigger performance increases, then that's fine too. But an example of the Ubiquiti equipment really comes down to like their VPN speeds are pretty atrocious given the class of the device, not necessarily the price of the device, but the class of the device that they're trying to promote. And I'll actually open up a comparison here to show you guys. All right, so I'll give you a good example here just to show you what I mean. And again, this is more about class than it is about pricing. But since they don't do very much like cryptographic acceleration for IPsec, you are dealing with a situation where you have most of their equipment tops out around a gigabit for IPsec tunnels. Now, we don't have enough testing yet from like the enterprise firewall core that just came out, for example, and they don't even have IPsec speeds listed for most of their firewalls. So I'm going to be comparing the Netgate 6100, which is something I actually personally have, with the Enterprise Fortress Gateway, which notably is slower than some of their newer firewalls, including the Beast and the Enterprise Firewall Core, like significantly slower. They may not be taking full advantage of the hardware there. There's more information on the forums about that. But the point is, the VPN performance is actually listed for that firewall. So we are looking here at IPsec performance, and even if I open the hardware comparison chart, the Netgate 6100 can do 1.77 gigabits over an IPsec tunnel. Now, that's with Intel Quick Assist acceleration, which is something that's cryptographically accelerated. And if I scroll through here to the, here we go, the 6100. So, that is iPerf, but of course, Ubiquiti does their testing with iPerf as well, not iMix. So iMix, we're looking at like half a gig. And this performance is fairly similar for WireGuard as well. And I have a fast enough WAN connection. I've been able to see performance in these realms. And it's really impressive from the class of firewall, because the Netgate 6100 is one of their smaller firewalls. If I go over to the Enterprise Fortress Gateway, which is supposed to be, enterprise, it's supposed to be very, very large. And you are looking at IPsec is stuck at 580 megabits a second. And that's, I almost guarantee you that's iPerf 3 testing with multi-stream. Like that's not going to be iMix like Netgate is listing. So, you're looking at, a difference of, 4x basically in terms of performance for IPsec. So this is with QAT again, so that's important to note. And that's with AES GCM, which is something that's not supported on Ubiquiti. Again, it's not so much that I want to see this supported just because, like, every firewall supports cipher blockchaining, so you could just use CBC. It's more the performance metrics that I'm getting at here. And the Enterprise Fortress Gateway is, as we look here, capable of doing pretty crazy fast routing, right? 12.5 gig IPS, 25 gig overall. And that's, of course, with iPerf multi-stream, best case scenario. I will fully acknowledge that. But if you go over here, like this guy, Firewall is only able to do 9.9 gig. So like the Netgate 6100 is a slower firewall when it comes to actual routing and firewalling, but it is 4 times faster when it comes to IPsec performance. And WireGuard's also notably close to double the performance. And that's in my actual testing. Well, I should say double the performance versus the Dream Machine Pro. I don't have an Enterprise Fortress Gateway to test, but against my Dream Machine Pro, I can get basically full gigabit out of WireGuard on the 6100, and I'm looking at like half gig, and this is real world, like transferring files over SMB and stuff out of the Dream Machine Pro. So that's another thing I'd like to see, and this really is a thing that comes down to what businesses need. This is not so much for home labbers, although it would be nice, but there are business settings that I have worked in and set up firewall networks for that could not have used any of Ubiquiti's firewalls because the IPsec tunnel speed was just not fast enough. There are business use cases where you need multi-gig IPsec, and that was just something that you couldn't do. And so there are scenarios where I have had to set up where you need to be able to sustain real world performance over gigabit. So not just iPerf, right? But we're talking like with packet fragmentation and other weird stuff going on. And that's something that Ubiquiti, at least as far as I can tell right now, does not have a firewall that would work for. Maybe once we see performance metrics from the Dream Machine Beast and the Enterprise Firewall Core, maybe those are accelerated faster. I haven't seen notes about GCM support, but still they may have just done enough to make IPsec faster on those. And hopefully I can get one of those at some point to do some testing for you guys. I'm working on a high performance Cisco T-Rex testing build so that I can start to do real firewall testing for people. And if I ever get my hands on something like that, I will do the testing to see what it's like. But anyway, you get the point, is they are behind when it comes to that. So another tiny interface thing that I'm going to complain about, I don't really like the policy table. It feels too messy, and I would prefer individual tabs for NAT, firewall, policy routing, I would prefer the way they used to do it. So I don't like the overall policy table. I think that was a regression when they added that, in my opinion. It's still perfectly usable. It's just I prefer the old way that the UI was set up. And I also, as somebody who does a lot of firewalling, I mean, you can see I have 139 rules on this alone. I prefer the zone-based firewalling view, and so I use that for all my firewalling. So I really only come here for doing like port forwarding and stuff, and I would like to just have that as its own tab so it's not so messy. But one of the things that I want to talk about is the port forwarding and the way that it automatically sets up a rule for port forwarding, because that is something I'm not happy about. So if I open this port forward here, I've got this set up, and this is just a standard port forward from my WAN interface, 443 to 443. This is for a reverse proxy I have. I'll probably have some of the IPs blurred out here just because, but this is easy to set up, and you can do multi-WAN port forwards and stuff, which is great. But if I go over to my zones, so now that I'm over at my zones, what you'll see is it creates this allow port forward for that port forward rule automatically. This is a rule that is locked. You can't adjust this. This is a rule that it automatically creates. I am not a fan of that. I would rather have a checkbox that lets me create or not create that rule. And the reason for that is that when I create port forwards, I typically only like to allow the region of the United States to go to that port forward because I have no reason for it to be accessed anywhere else. Might as well do least access necessary, right? This is a minor security improvement, but it's annoying to me because if you're going to leave the default rules in place, which I will talk about a little bit here shortly, but if you're going to leave the default rules in place, then you have to create a custom block rule to block this default rule that's created with the port forward and then create an allow rule. Now, for me, it's not that big of a deal. This is just an organizational thing because I put a block all rule on every zone to every zone and then manually do my firewalling above that. And the block all rule that you create takes place before any of the default rules. So this isn't the end of the world for me because my block all just catches that. But it's just a little annoying because I prefer things to be cleaner. And there's a lot of excess rules in Ubiquity's like default rules that you can't delete. And I would really like the ability to adjust these. And even if it's not a checkbox on the port forward page, I would be totally fine with just having it so that these rules, and this actually leads into my next section, that these rules could be deleted. So I understand you're creating these rules by default, and I think that's fine. But as the admin of the firewall, I should be able to do whatever I want. And that if I want to break my connectivity with a rule, I should be allowed to do that. Now, from a user perspective, you need to make it so that that's hard to do. So if there's an advanced settings option that says, I understand the risks of this, allow me to adjust default rules, and then I have to come over and delete these by hand individually rather than like a bulk click and it just deletes everything. Like if I have to come into this and be like, okay, this rule, click delete on it to get rid of it. And even if it's not even a delete, even if it's like a deactivate or something, I'd probably be okay with that. I'd prefer delete, and then maybe you could put the default rules in like a deleted rules folder somewhere in the settings or something, because the big thing for me is just cleaning this up. Again, I put a block all above everything. So from a firewalling perspective, it's not the end of the world because I can deal with it by just putting my custom block all, but it gets messy. Whereas you can see here, this zone right here where I have this set up, this is going to be external to my DMZ zone. It's set up in a way where it really only needs 3 rules, and instead I have 7 rules. And that's just annoying from my perspective. Like, this is more messy than it needs to be. And so if I do all policies, like, it takes a while to load because there's a shit ton of default rules loading that I don't need or want in there because I put a block all and then manually firewall everything above that. So if Ubiquity could make a change, again, even if it's an advanced setting that takes a while to get to, let me do what I want with my firewall. That's really all I'm asking for. Now, this moves into, I think, 2 other things here about firewalling. First is the zones. I love the zone-based firewalling. This was the most important update to the Ubiquity ecosystem in my mind. Their firewalls. The update, and I can't remember the version number, like 9.5 or whatever it was that made the zone-based firewalling come into play. This was the most important update that Ubiquity has ever pushed to their firewalls and took them from being a laughingstock to a real firewall. And you can hate on me for saying that all you want or whatever, but they were made fun of in the network community before then and are still made fun of in the network community now because a lot of people don't even know this is in there yet, even though it's been here for almost 2 years now. This turned it into a real proper firewall and got rid of the stupid, confusing firewall system that they had in place before. This was phenomenal. But going along with the being able to delete your own rule, your default rules, you should be able to at least rename and ideally delete some of the custom zones. And the reason for that is if I start adding zones in here, this gets really messy. And so like I'll do a test. Look how messy this is getting, right? And if I add another one, now we're going to get a horizontal scroll. Oh, actually, okay. Well, they maybe push a little bit. Once you get enough in here, you get a horizontal scroll. Now I've got a pretty big display here that this is on as well. If I were to like shrink this down a little bit so that it's like half of an ultra wide monitor, I'd already have a horizontal scroll bar. This, as you can see, starts to get really messy. I'm not a fan of how messy this is. And so what I would like to be able to do is delete the DMZ, delete the hotspot zone. And if you need to keep internal, external, gateway, VPN, like that's fine, those 4 zones, because like the gateway is never not going to be in the gateway zone. VPNs, you can't assign to a new zone, at least right now. It'd be nice if you could, but even if you never can, that's not the end of the world. But because of how messy this gets, I don't really like to add very many custom zones when I'm doing my firewalling. Sometimes I will for a little bit of organization, but if I could get rid of or rename the hotspot and DMZ zones and then manually assign interfaces to those so that I'm still dealing with like a total of 5 or 6 zones, that's going to make it a lot more organized, because this does get pretty messy in my opinion. And what I end up doing is I end up using pretty much everything on the internal except for like stuff that I have like public facing, that I'm like hosting like Minecraft servers or whatever, I'll put in a DMZ. But a lot of other stuff is just in internal, and I put my own custom block all rule, and then I block traffic and manually firewall between the different interfaces. But then you're kind of going back to like, well, now I'm basically doing interface-based firewalling instead of zone-based. And zone-based can be more organized. It's just that this is getting to be too many zones, and I'm just not a huge fan of it. So I actually have a big article on Medium about the way I like to do my firewalling. And in fact, I'll probably turn that into a video soon to show people what I mean in more depth here. But the point is, this could be cleaned up a little bit. So please let me, delete or at least rename some of the default zones. Some of them need to be there, and I get that, and that's fine. But I don't need hotspot and DMZ to be forced upon me. Those ones definitely could go. Now, another thing about firewalling is actually going to be related to the cyber secure section. So if I go here, they've got region blocking in here. This should be enhanced, in my opinion. Now, you could do this by just selecting regions and manually firewalling, and that's fine. And that might be the direction I actually end up going here in the future. But I've got Russia blocked as an example here for both directions, right? And you can select region blocking, enable it, put a block, and then you've got both outgoing or incoming, and you can select individual countries. This is nice and simple and easy to use, but it could be a little bit more transparent about a couple of things. First, I'd like more flexibility. I would like to be able to set up like lists of region blocking rules. And again, you can do that manually in the firewalling, but to keep things cleaner, they could put that in the region blocking section, similar to the content filter that they have, and make it so that you have lists. So if I go to the content filter here, you can see I can create multiple content filters that do different things. In my opinion, they should have something similar for the region blocking here. And if they did that, then I would be able to, be like, hey, I want you to block incoming from these countries, but outgoing or both directions for these other countries, right? And you can adjust your risk posture that way. The second problem I have with this is that there is no firewall rules that appear in the zone matrix based on the region blocking. If there was firewall rules, then I would know for sure where the region blocking is taking place. But because there's not, I have to make an assumption that it's happening before any of my custom rules. Now, as far as I understand, that's correct. And they might even have documentation that says that that's correct. But I am not a fan of not being able to see the rules that are created for the firewall by default. And Ubiquiti actually does better for some of that stuff. So like in pfSense, for example, if you have a DHCP server enabled, there are automatically rules added to allow that traffic. Would you ever want to not allow that traffic if you enable the DHCP server? Probably not. Like, you probably do want that in place. But I prefer to be able to see that, and those rules don't show up in the rules on pfSense. But if I go here to the zones again, and then I go internal to gateway, let's do DMZ to gateway because there's a little less rules here, you can see they've got the allow rules for DHCP in here. So I can see, oh, okay, they have allow rules put in place here. But for some reason, the region blocking isn't set up that way. I don't know why. Now, another thing that I would like to see changed is this default security posture that they added here. This was a great change when they put it in place, but in my opinion, this needs to be cleaned up a little bit. So just having block all or allow all first, I feel like changing this should apply to all interfaces or all networks and not just newly added networks and newly added switches. Now, setting this to block all is great because it does change your default switch port policy and stuff like that too. So you're not like, oh, you provision a new switch and you forgot to go block all the ports on it. Now you have a bunch of open ports to like your default VLAN or whatever. So this does more than just the firewall rule setting. But in my opinion, this should be done where basically it just creates a default block all rule and removes most of their custom rules. I guess that's just kind of the way my brain went to with this. And the problem is, even if you have block all on here, really all it's doing is setting the network to be isolated, which you can't even do to the default network here, but isolating the network, which just creates a block rule in the zone matrix for that network to isolate it. And in my opinion, I'd rather this just change the default so that the zone to zone matrix is block all by default instead of allow all by default. You achieve basically the same goals by doing it this way. And if you're putting a block all at the top of the custom rules, or sorry, at the top of the default rules, and then custom firewalling above that anyway, then this literally doesn't matter. And so I actually leave this unchecked on most of my networks because it just creates more firewall rules in the zone matrix that's messy because I block all anyway myself. So I clean it up manually, but that's kind of my point is, okay, you have this block all default security posture, which does quite a few great things. But if it's just isolating the network and creating more rules, it makes the rules in the zone matrix more cumbersome. And I would rather have this be a better, like, oh, this just changes it so that your internal zone doesn't have an allow to everything rule by default. And instead, it's doing a per network, or you can almost say like per interface, per VLAN isolation. And that's just not, like, that's not the cleanest way to do it, in my opinion. So I would like to see that adjusted. Another very minor thing that I would like to see added, and this is an interface thing, is the zone matrix defaults to all policies when you click it over here. I would prefer to be able to like set a default matrix tab or something like that. And the reason for this is just because once you start adding this many rules, it can get kind of messy. And when you try and load this, it takes a while to load it. This is a very minor thing, but it's just like having to wait like 3 or 4 seconds for your rules to load when you're trying to go back and forth and do lots of firewalling is a little bit annoying. And the rules that you have here, like the rule sets that you have here, load really quick when you only have a few rules. But when you're trying to load all of them, it takes a long time. Now, in this case, it didn't take that long because I'd already preloaded it. But a lot of times when I come in here and go to the zone matrix, I'm like sitting here waiting for a couple seconds for it to like load. So that would be a nice thing. That's extremely minor, but I did want to mention it. The final thing that I think I want to mention, and this is another minor one, is I would like to see Ubiquiti add an NTP server to their, not their configuration, but like to the actual firewalls themselves, or the cloud gateways as they call them now. I would like to see that. You know, we have this cloud gateway that can do a million things, you know, especially something like the Dream Machine lineup that can also run Protect, and it can run Access, and it can run Talk. Like, it can run all of these applications. And so you have this one box doing so much stuff, but then you can't host an NTP server with it. And like, that's a little bit weird to me. I just, in my opinion, I'm not the biggest fan of having to build my own NTP server. And of course you can use external NTP servers, but what if you need a network that's totally isolated from the internet, but you still need accurate time between those devices? Now one of those devices, like a virtual machine or whatever, has to host the NTP server because your firewall can't. I think they should set it up so that the firewall can host an NTP server. That way you can keep everything in sync on a subnet, even if that subnet isn't reaching out to public NTP servers. For whatever reason you have to do that, it would just be really nice because you can already do almost everything here. Like, it's an all-in-one appliance, but it doesn't have NTP services. It just seems weird to me. And you can set what NTP servers the firewall uses in the Ubiquiti devices, but it's not going to respond to NTP requests. There's no way to host an NTP server on Ubiquiti's actual gear, and I would like to see that. So I think that pretty much sums up my feelings and things that I would like to see added right now. I will certainly make follow-up videos if more stuff comes up in my mind. There is still more advanced features that you won't see in Ubiquiti that you do see in the bigger firewall brands. And especially like one example that I actually don't think you should use, but TLS interception. So like break and inspect the encrypted traffic with your intrusion prevention system with Suricata. You can do that on some other like enterprise branded firewalls with their Next AI service, right? Which I'm not even sure actually uses Suricata. I haven't done a deep dive on that yet. You can't do that on a lot of their firewalls though, including like the Dream Machines don't have it, right? That is a feature that I might make a dedicated video explaining why you should not use that even in a corporate environment. Doing your TLS break and inspect is a bad idea to do on your firewall, and you should never do it. But in terms of competitiveness with the rest of the market, a lot of your FortiGates out there can do that. Now you have to pay licensing and stuff for it, but they have the ability to do it even on some of their lower end firewalls. I would like to see Ubiquiti just add things like that to get them closer to feature parity with some of the enterprise offerings out there. They're much closer than they used to be, but there are still some things missing. And I'm sure there's some that I'm not thinking of and didn't put together in my notes that I didn't cover here. So I'll make follow-up videos if I come across more things like that. But this was just based on my notes of going through a lot of very recent firewalling with Ubiquiti stuff and some recent deployments. I was like, okay, I'm going to take notes on things that I would prefer versus the pfSense environments that I manage at a corporate level as well. So that was really what this video was based on, is a more direct comparison to that. So that's why like TLS interception I mentioned here at the end instead, because like you're not doing TLS interception on pfSense, and somebody's going to put in the comments that you can. Let's be real, not really. I think that pretty much covers it here. I appreciate everybody watching this. Definitely leave your feedback and, put comments down below if there's stuff I missed that you feel like they should see, no matter how niche or enterprisey the feature is, right? Like if we were talking about switches, multi-chassis link aggregation, MC lag, right? Is something that they have on like a couple other switches recently, and as I understand is still kind of buggy. That would be an example of a niche feature that most environments don't need, but like mention it. So if there's stuff that I'm forgetting or not mentioning here, please put it in the comments down below, especially if this is a video that like Ubiquiti ends up seeing or something. I'm sure they would love to see the feedback about it. So please leave comments about that, and I would love to conversate about it. And I might even make an updated video in the future of like new Unifi stuff that I would like to see Ubiquiti add to their Unifi firewall lineup. But that pretty much covers it here. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.